Okay, so this is metaphysics again, but this time I'm going to try a little bit of a different approach on the subject. Hopefully this will be to the benefit of those of you who have an interest, but also to Piero, so he can see where I'm coming from. As a few of you know, a few of you don't, about 7 months ago I was a little bit of an outsider to the subject, perhaps had a layman's understanding of philosophy and metaphysics, but I didn't really know it in any detail. Since then I have been studying it, and I want to just explain for the benefit of those of you who have an interest how I went about discovering what metaphysics was and my understanding of it thus far. Also, it might be to the benefit of Piero, so he can see the position from which I'm coming. Right, okay, so the first thing that we need to do if we want to engage in a philosophical discussion of any kind is accept certain things. There are certain things that we simply have to accept in order to engage in philosophical discussion. One of them is that our arguments and our discussions of identity, necessity, existence, causality, etc. are meaningful. That is, that they have meaning in themselves, which is obtainable by anyone that wants to read our arguments. We have to accept that philosophy in itself is meaningful and our arguments will be understood, otherwise there's no point doing it. So the second thing that we have to accept is philosophy is in itself useful or pragmatic or meaningful in its own right. Otherwise we'd just go off and do physics. If we want to talk about the meaningfulness of philosophy, we have to in some sense do philosophy. So the second assumption that we need to make is philosophy can give us certain truths, meaning, or is of some usefulness, which is not overlapped by physics. Again, otherwise we'd just do physics. Thirdly, I think we have to accept that the most basic logical operators, such as deduction, is valid. We have to accept that logical equivalence is a valid way of understanding things, that there are things that can be derived from deduction, just in the same way that in physics and the natural sciences we have to depend upon induction in order to make some of our claims about reality. So we have to accept certain primitive logical operators are a valid way of understanding, otherwise we cannot use deduction, induction or logic to have our arguments, and it'll be nothing but wild conjecture. So those things we have to assume. We might of course differ on what the nature of meaning is, the usefulness of philosophy, or indeed the particular logical systems which we use for which specific case, but generally we have to accept that certain principles such as meaningfulness, usefulness of philosophy, and the very basic of logical axioms are valid. Again, we might disagree on which logics to use, which axioms are valid and which aren't, but things like deductive inference we need to keep. Okay, so secondly, we've made those claims that philosophy is a valid way of understanding the world. In order to engage in philosophy, that's a necessary assumption we need to make. The second step to constructing a metaphysic or an ontology, I think, is probably, for those of you unfamiliar with the subject, reading something like this, Anthony Flew, Introduction to Western Philosophy, or Bertrand Russell, History of Western Philosophy, in order to get some sort of grounding and context for the contemporary discussion. So you read a bit of that, you'll of course choose which people you prefer, which people you don't, but really that's just a context for the contemporary discussion of philosophy. Okay, so you've done that. Secondly, I think you need to get some sort of anthology of some description. If you're going to do metaphysics, the J1 Kim anthology is brilliant. It's really well put together. It's got debates of metaphysics, from identity, causality, existence, ontology, blah blah blah, you name it. It's full of interesting arguments from a wide variety of different people. Of course, it's going to be difficult to understand the arguments that are going on without something like this. I don't think it matters what dictionary you have. Don't splash out. I got that from a charity bookshop. But there are certain words that you'll come across which will completely blow you away. You won't have any idea what they mean, just as I didn't. So when that happens, use your dictionary, make a note of it, and then you'll have that for future reference. So read an anthology. This is probably the first step to constructing a metaphysic. Read an anthology. Choose a particular issue within the debate, and look at many different sides of the arguments. From one article, you'll be able to see who they disagree with, look it up, see the validity of their points, and eventually you'll probably choose a particular side to go to. So after you're reasonably happy with your position, you should look up the related issues, things that are similar to those issues. So if you're doing philosophy of mind, this book is also a good anthology. It's Anthology by Chalmers. Read around the issue, and then eventually you'll be able to construct an ontology which deals with a wide array of possible problems and objections, etc. Now, once you've done that, you'll realize that when you go on to explore other areas in philosophy, some of the assumptions that you have held will be incompatible with assumptions you've held in areas of epistemology, philosophy of time, philosophy of causality, essentialism, morality, anything. You will begin to notice inconsistencies in the positions that you want to hold. So you might have to reconstruct your ontology here. Now again, I don't think that philosophy should be, or indeed is, the discipline of deriving all possible facts in the world from one single universal axiom of infallible truth. But it should merely be the practice of trying to make as little and as unproblematic assumptions as we possibly can in order to account for the vast array of phenomena within the external world. So that is philosophy, in my opinion. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave a message and I'll probably get back to you soon. Peace.